My name is Anna, and until recently, my life resembled the perfectly arranged books in the library archive entrusted to me. Quiet, predictable, covered in a thin layer of dust from being forgotten. Every day was a copy of the one before. The creak of the oak floorboards, the smell of old paper, the whisper of turning pages. I knew every crack in the ceiling, every scratch on the old reading table. This was my world. Safe, cozy, and terrifyingly dull. I'm 38, and the biggest adventure I'd had in the last 10 years was trying to order an exotic fruit online. It arrived rotten, by the way. Everything changed last Tuesday, a day that began just like any other. Mr. Henderson, our head librarian, asked me to go down to the basement and sort through boxes of books donated by the old Blackwood estate, which had been vacant for decades. The basement of our library is a kingdom of shadows and forgotten stories. The air here is thick, smelling of dampness and the past. I made my way between shelves piled high with yellowed newspapers until I found the right boxes. In one of them, under a volume of Dickens, I came across a book that was unlike the others. It was a thick novel in a worn leather binding with no title, but it was far too light for its size. Burning with curiosity, I opened it. Inside, instead of pages, there was a void. Someone had neatly carved out the book's core, turning it into a secret compartment. And in that compartment lay a small diary with a velvet cover the color of the night sky, tied with a faded silk ribbon. My hands trembled slightly as I untied the knot. I felt like a trespasser, intruding on someone else's secret. The first entry was written in calligraphic script, ornate and confident. May 12th, 1924. Today I turned 21, the girl wrote. Father gave me a pearl necklace, and Mother gave me another lecture on how a lady ought to behave. They see me only as a favorable match, a pretty doll for a future husband. But they do not know the fire that burns in my soul. They do not know Eleonora. Eleonora. That was her name. I sat in that dusty basement until evening, reading page after page. And with every line, my quiet, orderly life crumbled to dust, replaced by the life of Eleonora. Vibrant, passionate, full of secrets and prohibitions. She wrote about secret parties and jazz clubs she would sneak out to at night, about her bobbed hair and daring dresses she hid from her parents. She wrote of her dream not to be a wife, but a traveler, to see the pyramids of Giza and the lights of Paris. But most of all, she wrote about him, about Leo. Leo was an artist, poor but incredibly talented. They met in the town square where he painted portraits of passersby. Their love was a secret, an impossibility. She, the daughter of a rich industrialist, he, a penniless creator. When Leo looks at me, Eleonora wrote, he doesn't see a dowry, but a soul. With him, I can finally breathe. I read, unable to tear myself away. I stayed at work late into the night, then took the diary home, hiding it in my bag like the greatest treasure. My frozen pizza dinners were replaced by reading under the dim light of a floor lamp. I would fall asleep and dream of the roaring 20s, the sound of a saxophone, and the laughter of a young woman running through the rain to a secret rendezvous. In her diary, Eleonora described their secret places: the old Orion Cinema, where they kissed in the back row, the abandoned conservatory in the city park, where Leo painted her portrait, the Bridge of Sighs, where they would meet at dawn. And I, as if possessed, began to visit these places. The Orion Cinema had long ago become a supermarket, but I stood across from it, closed my eyes, and tried to imagine the velvet seats and the flicker of a silent film. The conservatory in the park was in ruins, overgrown with ivy, But I found an old bench there, just like the one Eleonora had described, and sat on it for hours, imagining Leo mixing colors on his palette. I started to change. I, a woman who had worn nothing but gray sweaters and sensible shoes for years, suddenly bought a bright red dress. I started to notice details, the way the sun played on the leaves of the trees, the smell of coffee from the small cafe I passed every day. I was no longer just Anna, the librarian. I became Eleonora's companion, her shadow, her silent confidant from the future. But the story in the diary grew more and more anxious. Eleonora's father had found a suitor for her, a wealthy heir from the next state. The wedding was set for a month away. "I will not marry him," Eleanor wrote, her handwriting becoming jagged, desperate. "Leo and I have decided we will run away. We'll go to Europe where no one will care who we are. Leo has sold some of his paintings. We have a little money. Tomorrow night, during the thunderstorm, we will meet at the old clock tower. He will be waiting for me with tickets for the steamship. I will hide the most precious thing I own in our secret place, and then on to a new life." That was the last entry. I turned the page. It was blank. And the next one. And all the rest. The story cut off at its very peak. What happened that night? Did they manage to escape? What was the treasure she hid? I didn't sleep all night. My mind was a swarm of questions. I felt that I simply had to know the end of this story. It had become more important to me than anything else. The next day, as soon as my workday ended, I ran to the central square, to the very clock tower Eleonora had described. It stood there, majestic and old, its hands long since stopped. Her last entry held a clue. "Where time stands still, under the gaze of a stone angel, I will leave what is most precious than pearls." I walked around the tower. On the north wall, just below the clock face, was the statue of an angel. I began to examine the stonework around it. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought the whole square could hear it. And then my fingers found it. One of the bricks moved. It wasn't set in mortar, but simply fitted into a niche. With some effort, I pulled it out. Inside was a small hollow. It didn't hold a jewelry box as I had expected. There was only a yellowed, folded piece of paper and a small key tarnished with age. I unfolded the paper. It wasn't a diary entry. It was a letter. A letter not addressed to Leo. It was addressed to me. Well, not to me, Anna, personally, but to whoever found it. "If you're reading this," Eleonora wrote, "it means you are a seeker, just like me. A seeker of a life hidden behind gray routines. You probably want to know what happened next. Did Leo and I leave? Were we happy?" That night, there was a terrible storm. I ran away from home when everyone was asleep. I ran to the tower and my heart was singing. But Leo wasn't there. I waited an hour, then 2. He never came. At dawn, soaked and crushed, I returned home. 2 days later, I learned that he had died in a fire in his studio on the edge of the town that night. They said it was an accident, but I knew it was my father's doing. He had found out about our plan. My wedding took place. I married a man I did not love. I lived a long, prosperous, and utterly empty life. I never saw Paris or the pyramids. The fire in my soul went out. This diary is not just the story of my love. It is my greatest treasure. It is the dream of a life I could not live. I am leaving it here in the hope that someday someone who needs it will find it. Someone who still has a chance to change everything. Do not repeat my mistakes. Do not wait. Live right now. And this key, it doesn't unlock any door in this town. This key is to your own life. Take it and open the door you've always been afraid to open. I stood by the old tower, tears streaming down my cheeks. I cried for Eleonora, for her broken dream, and I cried for myself, for the 38 years I had lived in silence and fear. I clenched the small, cold key in my hand. The next day, for the first time in 15 years, I didn't go to work. I called Mr. Henderson and told him I was taking a leave of absence, indefinite. Then I walked into the travel agency, the one I passed every day, and I bought a ticket, one way.